Greetings, it is I, Tantus Naravan Dracovin, your Lord and Emperor here at the Dracovin Empire, and welcome once more to the World of Darkness. Yes, we're diving into the World of Darkness again, and into Werewolf The Apocalypse. We're going over another changing breed. So if you're joining me, of course, live, hello live people, say hello in your chat, and if you're joining me on YouTube, remember, liking the video, ringing the bell, subscribing, all that great stuff helps out. Have any of you out there played an Ajaba? Or had adventures in Africa to encounter one? Because that's what we're going to talk about today. The Ajaba, the changing breed of particularly Africa. And it's not to say they couldn't be found globally, but they are one that really doesn't connect up with the rest of the world the same way. And there's good reason behind it. So, we'll dive into it. Why don't I start with talking about some books you can look into? And I will tell you, this is an interesting one because only one of these books is particularly really great for diving into the lore here, but the others establish a lot of stuff. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, Ajaba were really introduced in, I'll use this one here, the Beset book. Yes, they were introduced in the Beset Changing Breed book, not in a book on their own. This is where they were hinted at, where I'll talk about some trivia at the end of the entire thing here, but long story short, they were kind of classified as maybe being kind of a Garou, maybe kind of a Beset for a while. This point in time, the Ajaba aren't really their own thing, but kind of are, and it's weird. It's definitely weird. We kind of get us separating out when we get to the Player's Guide of Changing Breed, but we're not quite there, and it takes us into good old W20 in the Changing Breed books before we actually get Ajaba being their true own thing, where we've really separated them out from everything. And I'll talk about that as a little trivia at the end of the video here, but know that they've gone through a weird storyline of being associated with other things and not something on their own. Alright, I'm going to just go to the smaller one because we'll make it easier here. So, who are the Ajaba? Well, they're Werehyenas. Yeah, simple as that. They are a surviving breed of changing breed in the World of Darkness, but barely. And it wasn't the Garou who nearly drove them to extinction. It was the Beset. That's a thing that's very different. Normally, we talk about the War of Rage that, you know, decimated so many changing breeds. But no, the Ajaba didn't go through that. Not the same way. Not to say that they didn't have problems. So, who are the Ajaba? Well, the stories say that they are the African counterparts to the Garou, because they were created to be guise warriors on a continent without wolves. Kind of makes sense in a part. They have a division of role in their genders. And because of this, they do have spent much of their time bickering in amongst each other. That's historical. A lot of this history, though, beyond that, is lost. Gender roles, replacing basically werewolves, the Garou, in Africa, and bickering in amongst themselves. Then comes the Beset, and conflict with them, and war with the Simba, specifically led by Blacktooth. Blacktooth being a Dark Lord, a Midnight Black Simba who exterminated the Ajaba and ruled Africa for a long time cruelly and efficiently. It wasn't until 1998 that he found his end, when the remaining shapeshifters in Africa rallied behind an Ajaba woman named Kisasi and formed the Hadi. The Ahadi. We'll talk about all these things a little bit more, parts of that. But they ousted Blacktooth, ended the thing, and since then, the Ajaba in the last couple of decades have begun to rebuild. Blacktooth nearly wiped them out. The problem is, the Ajaba aren't in a position to rebuild as easy. They've changed. They're not the same breed. Much was lost by the slaughter. And there is a new tragedy that's come about that. The Ozozu. The Ozozu are Ajaba that have fallen to the worm. Before now, Ozozu didn't exist. It's not that no Ajaba fell to the worm. It's that the Werehyenas were effective at purging any that threatened to be corrupted from their ranks. They basically ensured no corruption. Violent purging. Maybe not the best idea, but it did keep them from having that. Now, with them so many lost, with them scattered, crushed, yeah, there are some that have fallen in despair, in anger, in hatred to the Defiler Worm that changes their weaknesses into strengths and become Ozozu, with the goal of corrupting their fellow, or their former fellow Ajaba. It's a new threat. So as I mentioned, though, the most notable trait about Ajaba are they are strongly divided in gender lines. This is more than just the fact that, you know, they have different roles. There are mechanically, in the game, different things. A female Ajaba are generally warriors. They have higher rage and lower gnosis. Males are mystics with higher gnosis, lower rage. There are some Ajaba that are born with inverted traits for their gender. Males that are born more like warriors, females that are born more like mystics, and they're seen as omens in amongst the Ajaba people. And whether that omen is good or bad, well, you'll have to find out. It's an omen, whether for great good or great ill, it's going to mean something that you have this inverted individual that can take on the opposite role than the traditional to their gender. So, there are, of course, 3 breeds of Ajaba. Hamid, Hyena, and Metis. Hamid, of course, born of humans. Hyena, born of hyenas. And Metis, born of 2 Ajaba. So, pretty normal there. Unlike Garou Metis, though, the Ajaba Metis are hermaphroditic. They have correspondingly moderate rage and moderate gnosis, falling in between the norms of both male and female. And they actually do receive some revenants because of this. Man, that word just broke my brain there for a second. People, they're looked at very positively. They are this bridge between the aspects of Ajaba society, in a way. You have to think about them. Now, before the fall of the Ajaba, and despite their warrior roots, they had some similarities to the Ragabash auspice for all Ajaba. But since they've rebuilt their society, they only have 2 recognized aspects. And each of those recognized aspects encompasses 2 different roles based on their gender. There are the Dawn aspect and the Dusk aspect. If you are a Dawn aspect and a female, you are a warrior, similar to the Garou Arun. The males are storytellers, similar to the Galliards. For Dusk, females are assassins, which are a more violent version of Ragabash, and the male are mystics, which are more highly talented theurges. So those are the kind of 4 rules. Again, gender roles, but again, sometimes there's ones that balk those gender roles, which would fill the opposite, which are seen as signs of something, and of course then there's the metas, which fall in between, and probably could fill any of the 4. So you do have choices, technically speaking. Now let's talk about their forms, just briefly. So they have 5 forms, much like a Garou does. They're very analogous to that. They have a Hamid, near human, Anthros, near man form. Of course, they're Krynos, which is a war form. It's a little smaller and less powerful than the Garou, but it is also a little more tough than the Garou is, interestingly enough. The Crocreus is a near hyena form, which is an enormous hyena the size of a small bear. And of course, the Hyenadid, their hyena form. Now, something about their culture that has remained is Renown. It's one of the little bits of culture we can talk about that we really recognize. Ajaba have always recognized cunning and ferocity as forms of Renown. But they have realized that their downfall was part to the recognize of infamy. As part of the Reformation now, they recognize as a form of Renown known as obligation, which rewards their duty to Gaida and their own kind in a less formal way than the honor known to other Pharaoh. So it's basically, instead of having honor, they have an obligation, and then cunning and ferocity are the renown that you will have. There is politicking in Ajaba. It's very fierce. Social status is incredibly important. Reigning females must always defend their position against challenges from their underlings, and these challenges are also quite a bit bloodier than similar affairs with Garou. It's not uncommon for Ajaba and power to have numerous allies, among them both warriors and mystics, who can help them legitimize their position. This is where the power of males in Ajaba society reveals itself. Males that enter a pact do so with new preset social rank, and allows them to ally themselves with any female who will have them. This means Ajaba mystics wield considerable power, as they alone often determine the fate of an entire clan simply by choosing whom they wish to support in numerous ritual challenges that plague a typical pack. So this is an interesting thing. Yes, it is female-dominated in the Ajaba, but the males do have a good say in it. You know, they're like, you know, I want you to be in charge, basically, that kind of thing. So it makes for an interesting dynamic that it doesn't mean the males are necessarily dominated. It means that they do have an important say. And yeah, they're not in the normal social structure. It might be really better to play an Ajaba male in that way a little bit. But again, this is traditionals. Now, we unfortunately do have to talk about the gifts and rights of an Ajaba. Well, that they existed at one time, unfortunately. As of now, as warriors of Gaia, Ajaba know the same range of gifts as Garou. But that's it. They may have at one time had unique rights, unique gifts, but the massive destruction that they faced and the massive loss of numbers has meant a lot of information has been lost. And any of those unique rights that they once held that differentiated their abilities from Garou are gone. And it is a sad thing, in a way. They've lost a lot of their culture, and it might be very difficult to regain. Maybe not impossible, but very difficult. So, the Ajaba Kisei was the one that formed the Hadi. This is an important part about how the Ajaba work today in Africa. The Hadi is actually a very recent development, remember, 20 years, and it's an amazing thing. It's because of Blacktooth. This is a coalition of Pharaoh that is this multi-raced confederation, multi-species confederation that strive to serve and preserve Africa, monitor Gaia, and fight the worm at all costs. That has Ajaba, Basset, Garou, the Silent Striders, and the Kuche Ingrid, Mokole, and the Corvid Mankunguru, which is a bloodline of Korax. This is a large group of it, and most likely they would get along and try to work with other Pharaoh that would be within Africa. They have created stability. Unfortunately, there are others that did not interfere with the entire battle. They weren't there to help out, so they can't really be considered as part of that, but generally speaking, the idea is that because they were allied thousands of years before Egypt, and they did work together, there's like, you know, pre-War of Rage, they could remain allied now. And because of the battles and stuff, the worm had seized opportunities here. This is an opportunity to unite and fight back. And the Ajaba are one of the groups heading this, even though they've had a lot. So the current Ajaba maintain great relationships with all these other changing breeds. The relations are, of course, colored by Blacktooth's tribe, the Simba. They hold Mokole in great regard for their role in helping destroy the Simba and his corruption. And they do give regards, grudgingly, to the Basset of other tribes other than Simba, because they did help unite against them. So it's like, yes, you're Basset, but you were against the Simba and the, Blacktooth reign. And they only really have contact with the Silent Striders. They do respect for their martial power. So here's where Ajaba have problems. They're unfamiliar with Pharaoh, not native to Africa. And they do have a hard time also understanding the Anasi. They are their own thing, always. Now, there is 3 Yava secrets that were given in the Basset breed book, the first book I mentioned, that were helped to use against the Ajaba when their defeat. Remember, Beset knows secrets, and when they learn them, they use them. Each Ajaba has a nick the size of a quarter in the back of their skull, and who strikes the soft spot will demolish their brain. Just a little spot in the back of their heads you can hit to demolish their brain. Mixing white wine in a hyena's footprint intoxicates the animal who left it. The stronger a drink, the longer the effects will linger. An Ajaba cannot bear the taste of baby meat. An infant younger than a year of age is always safe. I mean, these are interesting secrets. I just have to say. Java are always really interesting. It's part of the Beset stuff that just makes so weird things. The inherent secrets of other tribes and stuff like that. Or supernatural beings. Now, we have one final thing to talk about. A little about that weird lore of how the Ajaba came about. Because there is some strangeness. Because, like, the fact is, originally, Werehyenas were just considered to be African Garou that looked like hyenas, or bone gnawers before the Black Beset breed book. So they kind of existed there. Sort of. The name was introduced in the Beset breed book, which has some origins in various places if you want to look into it. And there is folklore on Werehyenas in African folklore. So if you want to look into those, there is a connection to that. Some of their imagery is very much so similar to, of course, gnolls of D&D, which are based on some actual, like, things. So that the gnolls are based on something. On Lord Dunasay's gnolls spelled a little differently, G-N-O-L-E-S, rather than the G-N-O-L-L-S of D&D. So, yeah. But yeah, no. There were also, like, various other information that you can kind of go into about hyenas. So, yes. That are more scientific, but not really needed here. And there are 4 types of actual hyena alive now, so they don't differentiate between the hyena breeds, but I assume if you are a Ajaba, you could be a spotted hyena, striped hyena, brown hyena, or an aardwolf. Your choice. Not one of the extinct species, because there are a few of those too. But that would be kind of like a personal choice, because they don't really differentiate between them. And I guess what region of Africa you'd come from, because I assume those are in different areas of Africa. So keep that in mind. But yeah, there we go. There's the Ajaba. I hope you enjoyed learning about them. They're a fascinating group because they've finally got some love when it came to W20. When we got to the 20th anniversary, we finally got some love for them, and they really have been on this like weird back burner that kind of was its own thing for so long. But that's only in lore-wise. They've gone through some crap. They're another one of the changing breeds that have faced extinction and managed to bounce back. And yeah, in like 20 years, it was the late 1990s that they finally like got rid of their oppressor who was trying to drive them to extinction. Granted, their oppressor was doing a lot of shit to a lot of people. You know, that's the problem that we kind of say there. Blacktooth was awful and doing a lot of bad stuff. So, good to get rid of him. It made sure the Ajaba can begin to bounce back. Begin to. It's just, they've got a long way to go. Where they're, you know, that could be actually storylines for an Ajaba group. Reclaiming some ancient rites or rituals or stuff like that that were specific to them that were lost. Diving into, you know, to the gauntlet and into the spirit realms to find that kind of stuff. There's a lot of things that you could go in for storylines, looking for ancient things, ancient cairns and stuff like that. There's so many stories that could be told that would be great, but, you know, they really don't exist the same way as much anymore, unfortunately. But still, they're an interesting group with interesting dynamics, interesting packs that they have, and this kind of build in like the way that they deal with their society. And yeah, there are things that buck their traditional norms of gender roles, but sometimes those are good. Sometimes they aren't, but you don't know until whatever omen comes about happens. And, you know, the metis being kind of this in-between, which is respected by everyone, is kind of a neat idea. They have a lot of interesting flavor to them, and I always love when we get into these discussions and we hit this interesting flavor and the lore deep within the Ajaba. So, anyway, I'll leave it there today. You know, maybe it'll interest you in playing an Ajaba at some point in time. Honestly speaking, it would be really cool. If you are interested in more stuff I do tabletop stuff Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, with Saturday as a backup day if life breaks one of those. There's also, those are discussions like this one. Crimson Queen on Wednesdays at 9 p.m. EST, where we have a Pathfinder First Edition live play with my friends. Really fun. Check it out. Discuss the tabletop Saturdays at 6 p.m. Talk about news of the week and deeper discussion topics. And of course, I do gaming streams. All the live stuff goes up on YouTube, so you don't need to join me live. You can always just join on YouTube and watch these there. And then I have social media, Discord, Twitter.com, linked below in all my locations, where you can check out and see my announcements of schedules, when I'm going live, and cat pics. Lots of the kittens that are in my household. I take lots of pictures of those. Anyway, I'm going to say for now, I hope you enjoyed. Until the next time we chat, hang out, do any of these kind of stuff, learn about more Werewolf the Apocalypse or more World of Darkness, I bid you all a deep and wonderful farewell.